Good morning. This is Faith at Faith and Books. How are you? I am about to run into the grocery store and pick up a few items like cat food, because I'm out of cat food, and I thought I would take this opportunity to make a brief video because I finished a book. I finished a book on Sunday, maybe, but it's been a crazy week, and I just haven't got. It hasn't been a good reading week at all. I've barely read. I'm falling way behind on things like Don Quixote and City of God. And this weekend is going to be busy too. I don't know if you can see it back there. I have signs. Can you see it way back there? Yeah, those two things sticking up way in the back. Those are signs for my church is doing this Adopt a Highway thing tomorrow morning for Earth Day. Yeah, today's Earth Day, and we're about to take the 6-year-old. My husband has the day off, so we're going to go into town, into D.C. We're going to drive into his office and park at his office garage, and then take the metro over to the zoo. So because it's spring break for the 6-year-old, and he's had a pretty dull week. But it's not been dull for me. It's been really, really busy, so I haven't read. But anyway, what I want to talk about is Belinda by Maria Edgeworth. I've mentioned this book several times. And it was the version that I read, I believe, on my Kindle, that I basically downloaded for very, very little money or no money, was published in 1801. It's a very long book. I've heard, someone told me in a message or a post somewhere that it was the longest book and longest novel, but it didn't feel that long. Although it did take me a while to read it. I first started reading it in February for Feb Regency, and then I got distracted. I didn't finish it for Feb Regency, and I think I didn't read it for 2 or 3 weeks, and then when I picked it back up again, I started all over again. So I'm not sure how many weeks it took me to read it. I think I started it back up at the very end of February, maybe, so all of March, and now here we are. But I finished it last Sunday. I'm pretty sure it was Sunday. Anyway, I found it fascinating. Now, did I think it was the best written novel in the world? No, it was kind of wooden in the way that novels back then were. Like, it's sort of maybe like Vicar of Wakefield, which I haven't read for a while, but I remember enjoying, but thinking it was rather wooden. So it's like that. But you can see how it influenced Jane Austen and Georgette Hare. This book, Belinda, I believe, I'd have to check, but I believe that it was mentioned in Northanger Abbey, or maybe some other book. But it must be Northanger Abbey because one of the characters, Sir Philip Baddely, in Belinda, really, really reminded me of John Thorpe in Northanger Abbey. You know, Isabella and John Thorpe, the brother and sister evil duo in Northanger Abbey. He must have been based on him because so many of the characteristics were similar, like the way he would always say Dan, spelled D-A-M-M-E, and how he was such a show-off and so thick-skulled. But he also reminded me of characters that Georgette Hare comes up with as well. But Jane Austen and Georgette Hare does these characters much better. John Thorpe is much funnier and more fleshed out than Sir Philip Baddely was in Belinda. And a lot of the book was like that. It was almost like a first draft or something. And then other people took up the ideas, like Jane Austen and Georgette Hare, and made it really, really went further with the ideas and really made them truly funny and truly reflective of human nature and human foibles and that sort of thing. But anyway, just in brief, it's the story of this young woman named Belinda. We never hear about her mother and father. We only hear about her aunt Stanhope, who is sort of a husband hunter for her nieces. So she's got 6 nieces, and she's already got did she already have 6 that she's married to what she considers you know, husbands, worthy husbands, because they have money or status. But really, they're all miserable. And she's actually gotten this reputation for being this cold-hearted husband hunter for her nieces. And so Belinda's the last in the line. We never hear about her mother and father. We don't know why Belinda is so virtuous, but she is. Belinda is maybe 18, not sure, very young. And she is just a paragon of virtue and good judgment and discernment. And, but in spite of that, in spite of her, she has to go through a lot of trials and kind of understated heartache, because there's tension between her and this other guy that she's supposed to end up with eventually. But she, so I still sympathized with her and liked her story and all that. But the more interesting character is the woman, Lady Delacour. So Aunt Stanhope's health is not good. So she sort of hands over Belinda's, coming out year, her debutante year, to this acquaintance of hers, Lady Delacour. And Lady Delacour is really interesting because she's terribly unhappy in her marriage. And the way she deals with everything is to be just the talk of the town, the high society. And so she's the one that throws the best parties, and she comes up with the best things to do, and she is really witty, and she's very sympathetic, because behind all this, it's all a veneer, and behind it all, as Belinda finds, is a woman who really is warm-hearted, but has made some really bad choices in her life, and is miserable as a result. And she's been betrayed by friends, and she's very jealous, and very skeptical of the goodwill of other people because of her experiences and her own tendencies. She's very aware of her own proclivities to do things that maybe aren't the best choices. But anyway, she's a really interesting character. And so we get her whole story arc, which is really interesting, and her friendship with Belinda. That's really interesting. And then one of the things was controversial, and I better stop talking really soon because I got to run in, because we got to get to the zoo eventually. So I'm pretty sure that I read the 1801 edition. Apparently later editions cleaned up some things, and I put cleaned up in quotes, because in the story, Edgeworth has Belinda becoming a possible, wife to Mr. Vincent, who is a Creole, and nothing is ever mentioned about why, that the fact that he's a Creole, that he shouldn't marry this, upper class white English woman. So it's never mentioned. There is mention of his West Indies plantations. That's where his wealth comes from. There is mention of his slave, but his slave is named Juba, and he is his beloved slave that he trusts very much. And so, I mean, I guess there's a little bit of stereotyping, but it's not bad, especially for that time period where you might think it would be a lot worse. I mean, one of the things is that Mr. Vincent also has a dog, which he names Juba after his slave, which I thought, although in my family we've done that. I have a sister who rescued a dog, and the dog was named Cindy, and they thought that the dog was too traumatized to change her name, because she was really kind of fearful. But at the same time, we have a niece, a really beloved niece, who was actually working for them in their family business as an office manager. So they had a dog named Cindy and a niece named Cindy. And then that happened in our family too. Like my son, I remember when he was little, my middle son had gerbils, and his first gerbil he named Jerry the Gerbil. And we totally didn't connect that my mother-in-law's first name was Geraldine, and she went by Jerry. We always called her Grandma, right? We never thought of her as Jerry. When she found out the name of the gerbil, I think we really insulted her. Anyway, and that also happened with our dog. We got a dog, and we named her Tilly, and then we found out that my father-in-law's mother's name was Tilly, but he never talked about his mother because she abandoned him when he was young, and he grew up in an orphanage. Anyway, so you can get into trouble naming pets after people names. But anyway, so there was these two Jubas, the dog and the slave. The slave, though, was, really, beloved. And then the worst prejudice in this book was against this Jew named Solomon, who Mr. Vincent's desperately trying to get a loan from. So that was like the worst. That was supposed to be really comical, and at the same time it was Mr. Vincent's kind of worst hour when he was desperate because he gambled away all his money. I'm giving you spoilers, I'm sorry. This is way late in the book. Mr. Vincent doesn't enter the book until the last quarter of it or something. Anyway, it was an interesting book. I'm glad I read it. I could see so many influences in Jane Austen and in Georgette Hare. For instance, Georgette Hare, unlike Jane Austen, always has her characters getting into scrapes. They're getting into scrapes. And it was the same way with Belinda. People would just decide to do something for fun or play some sort of joke or do something that was slightly naughty or not accepted. And then they would get into trouble. So you could really see where Hare got those ideas for her characters. So I'm glad I read Belinda. I recommend it for Jane Austen July. If you want to read something Jane Austen adjacent, as they say, I would recommend reading Belinda. So that is my review. And I guess I'll end here and run into the grocery store, and then I'll go to the zoo. So I hope you had a good day, and happy reading. Bye.